to our first ever Transition to Adulthood Clinic. I'm Melanie Carlos, Executive Director of xMinds, and I'd like to thank you all for coming. I know you're all eager to hear from our keynote speaker, but first, I want to introduce Melissa Rosenberg. She is the Executive Director of the Autism Society of Maryland, and she's been a wonderful partner, her whole team, and I just want to let her say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know we're competing with our wonderful resource tables over there, so thank you so much. Thank you to Melanie and everybody on the team at xMinds. I'm here with several of my staff members. They're over at the table. If we can help anybody, we're glad to do that. This is a lot to take in when you're filling out these forms and going through transition. So it's a really important topic, and we're here to be a resource for all of you. So thank you very much. And are we ready for Eric?
Yeah, I'll just introduce him. He is our keynote speaker, Eric Jorgensen, and he's the Director of Special Projects for First Maryland Disability Trust. Eric is an international expert in disability planning with decades of experience helping families navigate public benefits, financial planning, and long-term support strategies for individuals with disabilities. We are honored to have him with us today.
Thank you. Can I get just an estimate for ages? How many of you have children under the age of 14? And then, so the rest would be transition age 14 or older, right? Cool. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Autism Waiver. If you haven't applied for it yet and you have a child with an autism diagnosis, I do recommend you apply. There's a 10 to 12 year waiting list, which is why, if you have a younger child, apply. What the Autism Waiver will do is it'll pay for supports until the child ages out of school at 21. It'll pay for supports until the child ages out and goes on to an adult services waiver at 21. And it'll pay for just about anything you need for a child with disabilities. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is applying for Developmental Disability Administration Services, DDA. If you've never heard of DDA, DDA is the agency that takes Medicaid dollars from the federal and state government and pays for supports for individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities in Maryland. You have to have a child or you have to have an intellectual developmental disability to apply for DDA and to get services. The types of services it provides are going to be personal supports, which are going to be things like brushing your teeth, grocery shopping, all of your daily living stuff. It'll pay for vocational support, which is getting a job, keeping a job, job coach, maybe transportation, all of the things associated with working. It'll pay for residential support. So residential support means not only are they providing the personal support, they're also paying for a residence for your child to live in. So you're not paying rent or anything. The child will have a cost of care. This year it's $375 a month that they're on the hook for. But the organization that you're working with is covering the housing and the staffing for your child. And then the last thing that they're going to pay for is meaningful day or community living support. I don't know what it's called right now. It used to be called Meaningful Day. I think it's called community support now. It's getting your child out of the house. They don't want your child in the house 24 hours a day. And if your child can't work an 8-hour day, then that whatever period of time that child can't work, they should be out in the community doing something enriching. So if they can only work 2 hours a day, then community living should be the other 6 hours to get them out of the house at least somewhat. You can apply for DDA at any age. Supports will not start until the child turns 21. So you're going to I encourage you to apply as early as possible. And when you apply, what's going to happen is you're going to get a coordinator of community services who comes to the house. They're going to come to interview you, to interview your child, to figure out what's going on. It's important when you fill out the DDA application and when you're talking to the CCS to not oversell your child's capabilities. As parents, my son is 26. He's in a residential facility with 24-hour support. So I've been through this, and I can tell you, in my experience, it was very difficult to share and focus on the negatives But when you're talking to the CCS, when you're filling out the DDA application, that's exactly what you have to do, because you're asking for the state to pay for support for your child. So when you're when you're talking about things, can my child dress themselves independently? Well, do you take the clothes out? Do you start the shirt on their arm? Do you tie their shoes? If you do any of those things, the answer to that question should be no. My child cannot dress independently. Same thing with food. If you're pouring the cereal and then you let your child pour the milk, but you're there to kind of help them, they're not eating independently. It's really important that you highlight all of this, because DDA is going to prioritize dollars based on need. So they're going to look at what level of need do you have, and compare it to all the other people in the state of Maryland who have similar needs, and they're going to prioritize dollars that way. The other thing to be aware of is the Governor's Transitioning Youth Initiative, TY. That is for children aging out of school at 21. It is not for children getting a diploma at 18. So if your child gets out of school at 18 and with a diploma, there's a good chance they may not get supports right away, and they may go on a waiting list, because the dollars are going to be prioritized for those students who have higher support needs and end up leaving school at 21. I'm not suggesting that your child stay until 21 if they can leave at 18. I just want to manage your expectations. So if you're on the fence of, do I keep my child in till 21 or do I let them graduate? If you're on the fence and you feel like they're going to need support, let them stay until 21. There's also something, when you apply for DDA, there's two options. You can go the traditional route, which is with an agency, like ARC of Montgomery County, Jubilee, all of those, Chimes, all of those are going to be agencies that get DDA money and pay and hire staff and take care of your children based on what level of need they have. The other option you have is to do self-direction. Self-direction means you are in charge of the budget. You are hiring and firing your own staff. You are making sure that if the staff doesn't show up, you're going to take care of it. And I will own the fact I have a bias against self-direction. It didn't work for us because I couldn't find staff. I had there was one period where I had 30 no-shows to interviews. And I was offering, I think, $30 an hour for staff. So it's a full-time job because you are basically a provider. The other thing to think about with self-direction is if you are serving as staff for your child and you are doing everything for your child, what's going to happen when you can't support him anymore or her anymore? What's going to happen when you get too old or when you pass away? I mean, none of us are going to be here forever. So who's going to take over that self-direction when you're not here to do it? So that's just something to file in the back of your mind. When you're thinking about, do I do self-directed or do I work with an agency? And you don't have to settle for the first agency you interview with. You know, the Maryland Medicaid waiver will cover your child anywhere in Maryland. So if you're living in Silver Spring right now, but you want to move to Howard County, you can, and you'll still be covered by the waiver. If you're living in Silver Spring and you want to move to Florida, and you want to take your child with you, you're going to be starting all over again. Because when you move out of state, the Medicaid waiver doesn't transfer with you. So if you're thinking about moving and you think you're going to be doing it relatively soon, I would encourage you to do it before your child leaves high school. Because this transition thing, it's all across the country. And the only state in the country that allows people to stay in school beyond 21 is, I think it's Michigan at 26. So, and that 21 number is when services start. If you're not there when services start, you're going to get put on a waiting list. And different states have varying degrees of waiting lists. Maryland is the only state that has the Transition Youth Initiative. They're the only ones that transitioning youth are guaranteed to have funding. And that funding is good for a year. When I did self-direction, how did I get the funding? And then when I stopped, where did the money come from? So I changed waivers. And I told DDA I no longer wanted to do the self-directed, and then they just shifted me over. But every time you do a shift like that, there's an interruption in services, because it has to. You can't be on two waivers at the same time. And the same thing was, I was originally on a waiver that didn't pay for residential support, so I had to do that again because I wanted him to get into an apartment. So there was a pause where I didn't have any support, and then the waiver kicked in because he still has the need. It's just getting the state to process the request and then moving it forward. So be very realistic about what your needs are when you apply. So the question was, transitioning youth, what period is covered? It's from the time the child, let's say the child leaves in June 2025, it'll be covered till June of 2026 to get you, but once you're in services, you don't have to worry about it. It just gives you that 1 year. The funding is guaranteed because it's going to take you some time to get things ramped up in place. But once they're funded, unless you do something to take it away, it's going to keep recycling. And you can say, hey, needs have increased. I need to get additional services. I need to increase the budget, things like that. So transitioning youth covers DDA. DORS is a different animal I'll cover on my next slide. They all work together. So the question was, what happens if something happens to her if she's serving as the agent for her child? And I'll talk more about guardianship in a minute, but if you're a guardian of the person, then the state becomes the guardian of, because you're appointed by the state to take care of your child. When you die, the state will take over. When you fill out the DDA application, because Maryland has 4 different Medicaid waivers, the DDA application will cover all of the intellectual developmental disability waivers. If you have a co-occurrence of like a traumatic brain injury and you want to apply for the TBI waiver, that would be a separate application. But if you're doing something for your child with autism, you apply for DDA, you fill out the application, and then when the CCS comes, based on the answers you give them about the support your child needs, they will direct you to which waiver they think is appropriate. You can push back on that. Mistake I made was taking everything at face value. Not every CCS is there's a lot of turnover with CCSs. It's a very demanding job. They have very high caseload. So you may get a CCS who's relatively new and doesn't have the same amount of experience. I would encourage you to do your own homework and learn as much as you can about the programs available and tell the CCS what you want. One of the frustrations I had and continue to have with my CCS is they're constantly coming to me with, what do you want, what do you need, and not coming to me with, hey, here's all the things available, which ones do you want to use? So it still comes back on us as parents to know what we're asking for and what we want and need. But it's an imperfect solution, but it's the only one we have, and we have to work within the constraints of the system. So we talked about DORS, vocational rehab. DORS stands for Department of Rehabilitative Services. And what I have on here is Pre-ETS, Pre-Employment Transition Services. You can apply for pre-employment transition services as early as age 14. So you can apply to DORS. Every county in Maryland has a DORS office. And Pre-ETS is different than DORS, so you're going to want to ask for Pre-ETS. If your child is under the age of 18, you're asking for Pre-ETS or Pre-Employment Transition Services. If your child is over the age of 18, then you're going to ask for vocational rehabilitation. So the magic number is 18 and under pre-employment transition services, 19 and over vocational rehabilitation. And what pre-employment transition services does for you, in addition to helping them find a job, get a job, they'll pay for a psychology, a psych evaluation for employment. They're not doing a psych to give you a diagnosis. They're doing an evaluation to see what types of support would your child need when they get a job. They'll do a aptitude test. What types of things are your child good at? They'll do an interest study. They'll ask, what types of things does your child like to do? And it's all geared towards helping your child find employment. They'll come to IEP meetings. You may have to ask them and encourage them, but they will come to IEP meetings, and they'll work with the IEP team to focus on goals to help get the employment. It's a good way to build a resume for your child, so when they leave high school, they have a resume at 18. I didn't have a resume at 18, but it's something good to do, something good to think about. It's not a mecca, it's not awesome, because the DORS counselors, just like a lot of other state workers, have a huge caseload. So the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease. And they're not going to come to you with a menu and say, what do you want? You have to go to them and say, this is what I'm looking for if you want the best results. The way to get the best results out of any of this is to be a strong advocate. So supplemental security income, SSI, this can be a minefield. I'm going to spend some time here because this is where I see a lot of people getting frustrated. You can apply for SSI for a child of any age. However, if you apply for a child who is under the age of 18, they're going to look at your assets and your income. And your child is probably going to be denied because they're going to take into account what your assets and income are and put them on your child. When your child turns 18, all that goes out the window, even if they're still in school. So when your child turns 18, let's say their birthday is December 31st, you can apply for SSI on December 1st, and it will not count your assets. The first day of the month that they turn 18, they are considered to be a legal adult, and they are going to be looked at as having their own assets and their own income. So what do you have to worry about? Well, you have to make sure that your child's assets are underneath or below $2,000. That is a magic number. And that same number applies for Medicaid, but $2,000 is a magic number. What does not count as an asset is an ABLE account, a special needs trust, or a 529 education account that the child is not the owner of. So if any of you opened a 529 account for your child when they were born or when they were a little younger because you didn't know that the impact of the disability, there's no harm there. The 529 account will not affect the child's benefits as long as they are just the beneficiary, not the owner. And this goes for grandparents too. If a grandparent owns a 529 account and the child is the beneficiary, that 529 account is not an asset. So if Social Security asks you, you don't have to report it to them because it's not an asset. And this is where I see people get in trouble. So the other thing with SSI is what counts, once you get it, first of all, when you apply, there's going to be it can take 8 months to a year. And then I would say 80% of people who apply are denied the first time. So it is not for the faint of heart. You're just going to have to stick with it and expect that it's going to take a minute. When I applied for SSI, I got 2 letters back. The first letter was denying me for Social Security disability insurance, which I didn't apply for. But when you apply for SSI, Social Security looks to see if you're eligible for anything else besides SSI. So they're going to look to see, are they eligible for SSDI? So you might get that first letter denying you within like 2 or 3 weeks. Don't freak out. Read what the letter actually says and make sure it says SSDI, not SSI, because if it just says SSDI, you don't have to do anything. If it takes 8 months to a year to apply, does it matter if you apply 3 months before they turn 18? And the answer is yes, it matters, because they're still going to, if you apply 3 months prior to, they're going to deny your child because they're going to look at your assets and income. They will not consider your child's assets and income until the child turns 18. Now that 8 months to a year, you're going to get back pay for all of that. So this year, the federal SSI limit is $967 a month. So if you apply this month, well, June, if you apply June 1st and it doesn't get approved till June of next year, then you would take 967 times 12, and that's going to be what the first payment's going to be. So even though it takes a long time to get approved, you're still getting all that back pay. When you are looking at SSI, there's going to be a question of, does your child pay rent, or is your child supporting themselves, or are they helping with the household? Because Social Security wants to make sure that your child is paying for their fair share of support. If they're not, then they're going to reduce the SSI benefit by up to 1/3. So your child may only get $600 and something. The way around that is having a rental agreement or a room and board agreement saying that you're charging your child at least $345 a month. That is a magic number. Because Social Security wants your child to pay fair market value, and they have a formula. It works out to be like $342 and some change, but if you round up to $345 or $350, you're safe. And that you should be covered by showing that they're paying their fair share, and that it should not be penalized with in-kind support and maintenance. The law's changed. They're not looking to see if you're paying for food or anything. They're only looking to see, is your child getting help paying for shelter? So you can have a room and board agreement. You can have a rental agreement. You can say, we're going to charge our child $350 a month. We know they're not getting SSI right now, so we're going to hold off on collecting any money until they get that first check, and we'll get back rent when that first check comes in. Do you need a rental agreement for SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance? No, you do not. Because with Social Security Disability Insurance, you've earned that. To get Social Security Disability Insurance, you have to have worked you would have to have earned 40 credits over a period of, most people earn it over 10 years. You can earn up to 4 credits per year. The other way to get SSDI is if you have a child and you apply for SSI before they turn 22, then your child becomes eligible for something called Disabled Adult Child Benefit, DAC. DAC is something that Social Security may not tell you about. So when you can prove that your child has a disability that occurred before the age of 22, I have found that the easiest way to do that is by getting SSI before the age of 22, but if you haven't done it, if you have an older child, it's not the end of the world. You just have to show that disability occurred before 22. When you become disabled, or when you retire and you start collecting Social Security, your child will get 50% of your benefit. And it will be paid to your child as SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. It will reduce their SSI dollar for dollar because it'll be counted as unearned income. So if they get $1,000 of SSDI, and SSI is $967 a month, they will no longer get any SSI because it'll be reduced dollar for dollar. The other thing that'll happen is 24 months after they start getting SSDI, they will automatically be enrolled in Medicare. Now in the state of Maryland, when you're approved for SSI, you're automatically enrolled Medicaid. You can have Medicaid and Medicare. So your child can be receiving, so my son, I was widowed. My son is getting SSI, SSDI, he's on Medicaid, he's on Medicare, and he's also on my private health insurance. So these are the things I want you guys to keep in mind. One doesn't cancel out the other. I cannot think of a single reason to say no to the Disabled Adult Child Benefit when Social Security asks you, do you want your child to get DAC? Because even if you lose SSI because of the SSDI, there's a law that says you will keep Medicaid as long as you would otherwise qualify, meaning your assets don't go over $2,000. You will still keep Medicaid even if you're no longer receiving SSI. So what happens if you have, and this is relevant to everybody, if you go over $2,000 in the account for your child, then you will lose Medicaid and SSI until that account balance goes back below $2,000. They will look at it at the beginning of the month. So at the beginning of every month, they're going to look at your account. If you have more than $2,000 in it, then they will take away your SSI and your Medicaid. So the question was, can you put money that your child gets into the ABLE account so they never go over $2,000 amount? Yes, that is why the ABLE account was created, is to allow people with disabilities to accumulate more than $2,000 and keep their Medicaid and their SSI. There's at least one exemption for the, for income and stuff, if you're working and you're a student and you're on SSI, you can make a little over $2,000 a month without it affecting your SSI benefit. So going back to DORS, you have a child who's 15 or 16 years old, they get a summer job, or let's say they're 18 or 19 years old. They get a summer job, they're working, they get SSI. Normally what would happen is, if you're working, your SSI is going to be reduced by $1 for every $2 you earn. So let's say you make $100, then your SSI is going to be reduced by $50. Unless you're a student under the age of 22, I think, 22 or 24. So if your child is working, they can make more and put that money into the ABLE account and continue saving. I'm going to back up a second and I'll start I'm going to go over the process from step 1, 2, and 3. I apologize. I've been doing this for so long. I think it's just, I don't think twice about it. Step 1, you apply for SSI before the child turns 22, but after they turn 18. That 18 to 22 window is important. As long as your child can show that they have a disability that started before the age of 22, and they would otherwise be eligible for Supplemental Security Income, SSI, then they become eligible for what's called Disabled Adult Child Benefit, DAC. Disabled Adult Child Benefit is paid as Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. To get SSDI as DAC, your child has to have been eligible for SSI. So it goes SSI, SSDI, Medicare. And in Maryland, when you get SSI, you're automatically enrolled in Medicaid. So the benefit to applying at 18 is when you apply for SSI, let's say you apply when they turn 18, they get approved at 19, they get enrolled at Medicaid. At 21, they leave high school. Well, they have Medicaid, so now they're eligible for the Medicaid waiver. They start getting Medicaid waiver supports. And then when they're 40, 50 years old and you retire, they start getting SSDI. 2 years later, they get Medicare. One more thing about Social Security. You cannot give them too much information. You need to bury them with everything that you have showing that your child's disability. They're looking for progression of disease or disability. They're looking to see that your child cannot be gainfully employed. They're looking to see, has it progressed? Has it stayed the same? What have you done to try to make things better? What evidence is there that this is really disabling? You don't want to focus just on one disability. If your child has co-occurrences of anxiety, depression, anything, epilepsy, any type of other disabling condition or illness, you want to add that to the application for SSI. Because each of those could of themselves be disabling. And you want to make as strong a case as possible when Social Security is reviewing your case. If there's, in air quotes, just autism, it may not be a strong enough case. But if it's autism and they're agoraphobic and they have depression, well, that's going to make a stronger case for why they may not be able to work. So let's talk about completing an estate plan. When I talk about estate plans, what I'm talking about is a will, a durable power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and if you're going to be leaving assets to a child, a special needs trust. A will is just directing what you want, where you want it to go, all of that stuff. It does not replace having beneficiary designations on retirement accounts, bank accounts, things like that. The beneficiary designation will take priority over your will. The healthcare proxy, durable power of attorney, that is for somebody to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. So if you're injured, like my wife was on life support. I ended up taking her off of life support. That would be the role of a healthcare proxy. If you have a son or daughter in college who's 19, the doctors don't have to speak to you if they get in a car accident. This has nothing to do with disability. So you'd want to make sure they have a durable power of attorney so you can speak on their behalf. This is relevant to people with or without disabilities or disabled children. If you have a child over the age of 18, who you're not seeking guardianship of, then they should have an estate plan. The special needs trust side of it, when you plan for your child's future, you need to think about how much money are they going to need? Where are they going to live? How are they going to pay for that? What do they like to do? Because Medicaid is going to cover their basic necessities. It is not going to give anything for hobbies or anything that brings somebody enjoyment. And a question I get all the time is, how much do I need? And the answer is, I don't know. I would tell you, figure out how much your household is spending and divide it by, multiply it by 2/3. Because your child's going to need rent, your child's going to need groceries, utility bills. If they can drive, they're going to need some kind of transportation. They're going to need all those, the same things that you have. For me, when I did my plan, I decided I want to leave my son $5,000 a month because I figured that would cover housing if I wasn't able to get him into a residential facility, and it would cover everything else. I also applied for things like food stamps and things like that to help offset some of those expenses. I also wanted to make sure I had a little extra buffer above and beyond that $5,000 a month in case something happened to his Medicaid or in case something happened to DDA. So I built in a buffer to where I'm leaving my son $1 million in a special needs trust because I'm worried about what happens if he doesn't qualify for Medicaid or something, because whoever comes after me isn't as diligent about making sure things are the way they should be. What do you want your child to do? What does your child need? Does your child need complicated medical equipment that you have to pay for out of pocket because insurance doesn't pay for? Does your child have a unique diet that maybe the agency supporting him or her isn't going to be on top of or as willing to pay for, and maybe you need money to pay for that? Maybe you want your child to eat all organic food, so you want to have money set aside so there's no excuse that they don't buy organic because SNAP won't cover all of that grocery bill. So that's kind of a framework for that kind of stuff. All right, so these are some situational to-dos. If they don't apply to you, don't worry about them. If you have a child who was born male, then they have to register for Selective service between the ages of 18 and 22. They must. If they do not apply for Selective service, then federal benefits could be jeopardized. They can't work for the federal government if they don't apply, and they may not be able to work for the state government if they don't register. Selective service is also known as the draft. If you have a child with significant disabilities, your child is not going to get drafted. When I registered my son, I think the week after I got a call from a Marine Corps recruiter. And I said, well, my son's disabled. You can have him if you want him. And they said, nope, and never got another call. So it takes 2 seconds to go to the website and do. The cost of not doing it could be really high. So the federal government used to have a thing where they're trying to hire 1% of their workforce coming from people with disabilities. When you think about how many people are employed by the federal government, 1% is a large number of people with disabilities to get hired. If you don't register for Selective service, you can't work for the federal government. If you don't register for Selective service, you can't apply for FAFSA, which is the money for college. You can't apply for that. You won't get approved. It may not be important, but I would rather just have you do it because it takes 2 seconds instead of rolling the dice of what happens if you don't do it. Open an Enable account. I don't think everybody has to open an Enable account right away. I'm putting that qualifier on it because I've seen too many people open an Enable account and think their planning was done and not do an estate plan and not do any of the other planning I would like to see you do. If you have money in your child's name and you're getting ready to apply for Social Security, SSI, open the Able account, move money into the Able account. An Able account is achieving a better life experience. It's a savings vehicle where you can put in up to $19,000 a year this year. It's adjusted for the gift, whatever the gift tax elimination is. It might go up next year, but this year it's $19,000. That is aggregate. So that means everybody putting money into the account can only contribute up to a maximum total of $19,000. It can't be 5 people putting $19,000 in. It's limited to a max of $19,000. If you have more than $100,000 in the Able account, SSI is going to stop until you are back below $100,000. If you want to do something because you feel bad about charging your son or daughter for rent or room and board, and you just don't feel right keeping that money, put the money into the ABLE account. Nobody cares what happens to it after the child pays you. Federal employees, if you're a Fed employee, you can keep your benefits for your child after they turn 26 for health insurance. Same thing with military. I'm going to skim over these. I'm around, you can ask me about them. Housing vouchers. Anybody with a disability is eligible for a housing voucher. It's based on income, not disability status. So you're competing with everybody else in the state who has low income. But the housing voucher will pay for, what happens is they're going to look at you or your child. They're going to say, what's 30% of your income? That is what you're on the hook for paying rent or mortgage. And then the state will pick up the rest with the voucher. And then food stamps, $262 a month is the maximum right now. Anything that has a nutrition code on the label, you can use food stamps to pay for. And you can buy it from Amazon, you can buy it from Whole Foods, you can buy stuff online. It won't pay the delivery fee, but you can buy groceries. And that's another thing that you want to apply for.
Eric, thank you so much. It's been so much great information, right, guys? Terrific. Thank you. Thank you.